I never thought I'd feel anything again, at least not like this. After 2 divorces and years of chasing the wrong kind of love, I had finally made peace with loneliness. I was 42, living in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, working as an interior designer. My days were full of color and creativity, but my nights were cold, quiet, and hollow. When I met Daniel, I wasn't looking for fireworks. I wanted peace. He was calm, kind, dependable, everything I thought I needed. We married after a year, and I moved into his home. What I didn't expect was Ethan, his 22-year-old son from his first marriage, coming to live with us temporarily while he finished his last semester of college. I had only met him twice before. He was polite, soft-spoken, always with a book or headphones, like he was hiding from the world. I didn't think much of him at first. He called me Claire and barely made eye contact. We lived under the same roof, but it felt like we were just strangers passing through. That changed the night Daniel left for a 6-month consulting project in Toronto. Suddenly, it was just Ethan and me. The house felt larger, emptier, full of silence. But silence has a way of revealing things. One evening, I came home late, exhausted, and he had made dinner. It's pasta and garlic bread. But the gesture touched me more than it should have. We sat together, ate in the soft light of the kitchen, and for the first time really talked. Over the next few weeks, the routine continued. Dinner, conversation, laughter. We discovered we liked the same old jazz records. We both hated small talk. He told me about his writing, how he wanted to travel, how he sometimes felt like a guest in his father's life, listened, drawn in by the quiet passion behind his words. He wasn't just thoughtful, he was deep, observant, wounded in a way that mirrored my own cracks. I started noticing little things, how his eyes lingered on mine a second longer than they should, how he smiled when I walked into the room. One night I caught him looking at me while I was brushing my hair in the mirror. Pretended not to notice, but my skin burned with awareness. I told myself it was nothing, that I was projecting, that he was just being kind. But the truth was harder to ignore. Every time we laughed, every time our hands brushed in the kitchen, it felt like we were dancing around something unspoken. I tried to create distance. I buried myself in work. But even then, he would send me sweet texts, little check-ins that made my heart flutter in ways it hadn't in years. I knew this was dangerous. Ethan was my stepson, at least legally. But he didn't feel like family. He felt like a man I wanted to know deeply. I started dreaming about him, the kind of dreams that left me flushed and guilty in the morning. I avoided eye contact. He didn't push. But the energy between us, it was no longer innocent. It was heavy, charged, the kind of tension you feel right before a storm. I was ashamed, confused, and yet alive in a way I hadn't felt in over a decade. That was the most dangerous part. Because once you feel that spark again, that pulse of real connection, you can't unfeel it. You start wondering what it would be like to stop pretending, to stop being careful, to give in to what your heart has already decided. But I was terrified, because crossing that line meant setting fire to everything safe. And yet, in the quiet moments, when it was just me and Ethan in the same room, breathing the same air, I couldn't help but wonder, what if the fire is worth it? Asterisk, it happened on one of those quiet, rainy nights where the whole world seems to slow down. The wind howled softly outside, the power flickered, and eventually, the lights gave out. I lit a few candles in the living room and found Ethan sitting on the floor by the fireplace. A blanket over his shoulders, the soft glow making his face look older, more serious. He smiled at me like he'd been waiting. I brought out a bottle of wine, the good one I had been saving for a special occasion, though I didn't know what for anymore. We played an old board game, laughed at how bad we were at it, and shared stories we hadn't told before. He opened up about his mom, how distant she'd become, how he'd always felt like a background character in his dad's life. I told him how tired I was of pretending to be fine, of being the strong woman who always held it together. The way he looked at me then wasn't like a stepson, not even like a friend was like a man who saw a woman, truly saw her and admired what he found. The moment stretched between us, thick with meaning, full of all the things we hadn't said. I stood to refill our glasses, and when I turned, he was right there in front of me, close, too close. His hand reached out slowly like he was giving me time to stop him. But I didn't move. I didn't say a word. And then, gently, he touched my face and kissed me. Soft at first, cautious. But when I kissed him back, everything changed. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was slow, deep, full of emotion we'd been holding back for too long. When we finally let go, when the kiss turned into something more, it wasn't just about lust. It was about need, comfort, understanding. That night, we crossed the line we swore we never would. And for the first time in years, I felt desired, seen, alive. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and blinding, like it was trying to wash away what we had done. I sat at the edge of the bed, wrapped in a sheet heart. Pounding, guilt slowly crawling in. Ethan walked in, shirtless, coffee in hand, and sat beside me. He didn't speak right away. Neither did I finally, I whispered. Was this a mistake? He looked straight at me, eyes soft but serious, and said, "It didn't feel like one." But the reality around us started to shift. We couldn't look at each other the same way in public. We couldn't risk the wrong word, the wrong glance. At breakfast, the space between us felt heavy with unspoken things. We were careful, so careful. We waited until the house was empty, the blinds were closed, and even then, our moments felt stolen. But those stolen moments, they were full of passion, of tenderness, of something real. And I hated how right it felt, because I knew how wrong it looked. I was his stepmother, even if I never raised him. Even if he was already a grown man, the world would never understand. And just when I thought I had a handle on all of it, just when I thought I could manage the secrecy, the thrill, the guilt, Daniel came home early, heard the door open one evening while I was in the kitchen. Ethan froze when he saw his dad walk in with his suitcase in hand and a tired smile on his face. My heart dropped. Everything we had done, everything we had felt, was now in danger? We had crossed a line we couldn't uncross him now. The man who tied us together was back in the house. The secret we had been hiding was suddenly too close to be safe. And for the first time since that night, I felt afraid not of what we had done, but of what would happen next. After Daniel came home, everything changed. The house that had once felt open and free now felt tight, almost suffocating. The air between us was no longer charged with longing, but filled with tension and fear. Ethan barely spoke. I avoided, looking at him whenever Daniel was around, afraid one glance would give us away. Daniel didn't seem suspicious at first. He was tired from traveling, full of stories from his time in Toronto, and completely unaware of the storm that had passed through our home while he was gone. But I could feel Ethan pulling away, not out of guilt, but to protect me. He started spending long hours out of the house, at the gym, the library, sometimes just driving. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about him just down the hall, so close, yet completely out of reach. One night, I overheard raised voices coming from the garage. Ethan and Daniel were arguing. Couldn't hear every word, but I caught pieces. "You were never there. Don't lecture me. You don't even know her." When Ethan stormed past me moments later, his eyes were red and his jaw tight. I followed him up to his room and closed the door behind me. "What happened?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, exhausted, heartbroken. "He cheated on you. Claire, before the wedding, while you were planning your life with him, he was flying to Chicago every other week to see someone else." I stared at him, stunned. "How do you know?" I asked. "'Cause I caught him, saw the texts. I never said anything because I didn't think it was my place. But now, I can't watch you love a man who doesn't deserve you." His words crushed me. Every late night Daniel had brushed off. Every vague excuse suddenly made perfect sense. I felt stupid, used. But worse, I felt betrayed, not just by Daniel, but by myself for not seeing the truth. My heart was torn. It stepped into something forbidden with Ethan, but now it felt less like a mistake, and more like fate pulling me toward the truth. Ethan wasn't just the one who comforted me in Daniel's absence. He was the one who chose me even when it was risky. Later that week, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, his eyes searching mine. "Is there something going on between you and Ethan?" The words hit like a hammer. I froze. My lips parted, but no. Sound came. The silence between us said everything. He stood slowly, without anger, just a deep, bitter sadness, and walked away. I knew then we had crossed a line we could never come back from. The days that followed were heavy. Daniel slept in the guest room. Ethan left for hours at a time. And I just stood still in the middle of it all, realizing my entire life was breaking open. I wasn't the villain or the victim, was a woman who made a choice. A messy human choice. And now I had to live with it. But somewhere in that pain was also freedom. I no longer had to pretend. I no longer had to lie to myself about what I wanted or who I needed. And as much as it scared me, I knew this wasn't the end of the story between me and Ethan. It was just the beginning of something real, something raw, something that had the power to either destroy us or finally set us free. Asterisk after Daniel left the house for good, the silence was almost unbearable. There were no more lies, no more pretending, but the truth left behind a mess I wasn't sure how to clean up. Friends started calling less. Family looked at me differently. Some didn't even bother to hide their judgment. I heard the whispers words like disgrace and shameful, as if they knew what had happened between me and Ethan, and worse, as if they understood it. But they didn't. They couldn't, because what Ethan and I shared wasn't some careless fling, it was real. Complicated, yes, messy. Hard to explain, but still real. After Daniel moved out, Ethan and I had space to breathe. But space didn't mean ease. We argued, we cried. We questioned everything, our timing, our choices, whether this could ever be something we could live with openly. He was only 23 now, with his whole life ahead of him, and I worried that maybe I had stolen some part of his youth. That maybe one day he'd look back and see this as something he regretted. But every time I asked him that, every time I tried to push him away, pulled me closer. "You didn't take anything from me," he told me once as we lay in bed, the morning light brushing across our faces. "You gave me something I've never had, someone who sees me, someone who stays." That was the thing about Ethan. He didn't just love me in the quiet, secret moments. He loved me out loud, even when it was hard. We moved into a small home just outside the city, started fresh. We kept things private, not hidden, but protected. We went to therapy. We worked through the shame and the trauma, not just from what we had done, but from all the wounds we both carried before we ever found each other. Some days were hard. Some nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if we'd ever truly be accepted. But there were also days filled with peace, coffee on the porch, his laughter in the kitchen, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. And that made every hard moment worth it. One evening in the middle of July, Ethan took me out to the lake where he used to go fishing with his grandfather. The sky was streaked in pink and gold, the water still and quiet. He held my hand the whole walk down the trail, and I felt that same nervous flutter I'd felt the night we first kissed. When we reached the dock, he turned to me, his hands shaking. Slightly, "I know this isn't a fairy tale," he said softly. "I know the world will never see us the way we see each other. But I don't care. I love you, Claire. Not because it's easy. I love you because it's true, and I want a future with you, no matter how hard we have to fight for it." Then he dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. My heart swelled. I didn't need the world's approval. I just needed him. And in that moment, I realized we hadn't ruined anything. We had built something beautiful out of the ruins. So I said yes, not to a perfect life, but to an honest one. And in a world full of lies, secrets, and judgment, choosing to love without shame. That was the bravest, most romantic thing either of us had ever done.